The water was ice cold as it cascaded down my face, soaking my hair, my carefully chosen blouse, and even seeping into my bra. My sister Julie stood over me, empty glass in hand, her face contorted with a hatred I couldn't quite comprehend. 10 minutes to leave my house, she sneered, her voice cutting through the shocked silence of the dining room. What shocked me more than the water was the reaction from my parents, seated across the table. Instead of outrage at this treatment of their younger daughter, they nodded eagerly, actually clapping in support of this humiliation. For a moment, I sat frozen, water dripping from my chin onto the half-eaten dinner below. Then something inside me shifted. I calmly reached for a napkin, wiped my face with deliberate slowness, and smiled. With steady hands, I pulled out the thick stack of documents from my waterproof messenger bag. "Well then," I said, my voice cold as the water still running down my spine, "you've only got 10 minutes left to pray." I'm Alice, 32 years old, and a financial investigator specializing in fraud detection. Growing up, I was always the responsible one, the rule follower, the good girl who got straight A's and never caused trouble. My older sister Julie, 35, was the golden child. Beautiful, popular, and masterful at making our parents believe the sun rose and set on her command. While I became fascinated with numbers and patterns, Julie cultivated the art of charm and manipulation, skills that carried her through life with remarkable ease. After college, while I built a career in financial investigation, Julie married Doug Preston, a charismatic real estate developer with perfect teeth and promises of wealth. Our parents adored him from day one, especially when he started including them in what he called exclusive investment opportunities. They even helped finance the mansion Julie and Doug now lived in, a sprawling 6-bedroom home in the most prestigious neighborhood in town, complete with a pool that Julie made sure to mention in every conversation. Meanwhile, I had been rebuilding my life after a painful divorce last year. Tom, my husband of 5 years, had cheated with his 23-year-old assistant, a cliché I never thought would happen to me. The divorce settlement was decent but not extraordinary, enough for me to afford a modest 2-bedroom apartment while I figured out my next steps. For months, Julie had barely acknowledged my existence. No calls checking how I was doing after the divorce, no offers to get coffee, nothing. That's why I was surprised to receive her text last week inviting me to Sunday dinner with our parents. "It's been too long," she wrote. "Family should stick together." Hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe she'd finally grown up. Maybe my parents were ready to see me as something other than Julie's plain, boring sister. Maybe we could be a real family after all. I arrived at Julie's house 15 minutes early, a habit I couldn't break. As I walked up the immaculate stone pathway to the front door, I noticed my parents' car already in the driveway. Instead of ringing the doorbell immediately, I paused to check my lipstick in my compact mirror. That's when I heard their voices floating through the open window of Julie's living room. "She's still devastated about the divorce," Julie was saying. "Tom left her with basically nothing. She's so desperate for money right now. Poor Alice," my mother sighed, "always making the wrong choices." "That's why this is perfect timing," Doug's smooth voice joined in. "The Westlake development is exclusive. Investors are lining up, but I've held a spot just for family." "She just received her divorce settlement," my father added. "Enough to buy in at the ground level." "Exactly," Julie said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Just don't mention how much we've already invested. She's always been jealous of what Doug and I have. If she thinks we're all in, she'll jump at the chance to finally be part of something successful." I stood frozen, the compact still in my hand, as their words sunk in. They hadn't invited me because they missed me. This was an ambush, a coordinated plan to get my divorce money. And my parents were fully complicit. Taking a deep breath, I closed my compact, straightened my shoulders, and rang the doorbell. I could walk away, but something inside me needed to see just how far they would go with this charade. I hadn't spent years investigating financial fraud without developing an instinct for deception. And right now, those instincts were screaming. "Alice!" Julie exclaimed as she opened the door, her arms wide for an embrace that felt as fake as her eyelashes. You look like you're doing okay." The backhanded compliment rolled off her tongue so naturally that our parents, appearing behind her, didn't even flinch. My mother air-kissed both my cheeks while my father gave me an awkward side hug. Come in, come in. Julie ushered us toward the dining room. Doug's just opening the wine. The house was exactly as I remembered it, showcasing Julie and Doug's wealth in every crystal light fixture and marble surface. Family photos lined the hallway, conspicuously featuring Julie, Doug, their children, and our parents at various vacations and events. I noticed there wasn't a single photo of me. Doug greeted us in the dining room, all white teeth and firm handshakes. Alice, it's been too long. How's the world of number crunching treating you? It's financial investigation, Doug. And it's going well, thanks. Right. He nodded dismissively while pouring expensive red wine into everyone's glasses. Still working for the government, then? Julie mentioned something about that. Julie's children, 8-year-old Addison and 6-year-old Jackson, made brief appearances before their nanny whisked them upstairs for dinner in the playroom. They have a strict routine, Julie explained with the self-importance of someone who'd read exactly one parenting book. We don't deviate, even for family dinners. Throughout the elaborate meal Julie had catered, while claiming she'd cooked it herself, the conversation flowed around me rather than with me. My parents fawned over Julie's new kitchen renovation, Doug's golf handicap, and the children's private school achievements. Whenever I tried to contribute, I was either talked over or met with polite but disinterested nods. So, Alice, Doug said during a lull between the main course and dessert, Julie tells me you've finally gotten your divorce settled. The table went quiet, all eyes turning to me. I took a slow sip of wine before responding. Yes, about a month ago. Tough break, Doug continued. But you know what they say? When one door closes, a window opens. Or in this case, maybe an investment opportunity. And there it was, the real reason for this dinner party. Doug's being modest, Julie jumped in, but his new development in Westlake is generating incredible buzz. It's completely exclusive, isn't it, honey? Very exclusive, Doug confirmed. We've only opened it to family and our closest friends. The returns are projected to be substantial. My mother reached across the table to touch my hand. We've invested quite a bit ourselves, Alice. It would be wonderful if you could be part of this too. I noticed she didn't specify how much quite a bit was. What exactly is the development? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Doug launched into a well-rehearsed pitch about luxury condominiums, exclusive amenities, and guaranteed returns. He used all the right buzzwords: sustainable, cutting edge, unprecedented opportunity, but provided surprisingly few concrete details. Sounds interesting, I said carefully. Do you have any prospectuses or financial projections I could look at? A flicker of annoyance crossed Doug's face before his salesman smile returned. Of course! I didn't bring them tonight since this is a family dinner, not a business meeting. But I can have them sent over. I'd appreciate that. And what's the minimum investment? Doug named a figure that was almost exactly the amount of my divorce settlement. What a coincidence. That's substantial, I said. I'd need to think about it. Financial decisions like this require due diligence. Julie's smile tightened. Due diligence? It's family, Alice. Don't you trust us? It's not about trust, I replied. It's about being careful with the only money I have right now. Always so cautious, my father said with a disappointing sigh. Sometimes you need to take risks to get ahead in life. Like Julie did, my mother added, beaming at my sister. Look how well that turned out. Julie preened at the praise while Doug topped off everyone's wine glasses. We understand, Alice. Take your time. But don't take too long. Spots are filling up fast. I nodded and asked a few more questions about expected returns, contingency plans, and investor protections. With each question, Julie grew visibly more agitated, shifting in her seat and exchanging glances with Doug. Finally, she put down her fork with a clatter. For God's sake, Alice, why do you always have to ruin everything with your questions and doubts? This is why Tom left you, you know. You never know when to just be grateful for an opportunity. The table fell silent. The mention of my ex-husband was a deliberate wound, and Julie knew it. Julie, Doug said in a warning tone, but his eyes showed he wasn't actually displeased with her outburst. No, I'm tired of this, Julie continued, her voice rising. You're always jealous of what Doug and I have built. Every family gathering, every holiday, you're there with your judgmental looks and your little comments. And now when we're trying to include you in something amazing, you act like we're trying to scam you. I never said. You didn't have to, it's written all over your face. Julie stood up, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Some of us actually make something of our lives instead of hiding behind government jobs and failed marriages. My parents said nothing to defend me. Instead, my mother reached out to pat Julie's arm soothingly, while my father shook his head at me, as if I'd been the one to start this scene. In that moment, I understood with perfect clarity that I would never be an equal in this family. I would always be the outsider, the one who didn't quite fit the narrative they'd created. And now, I was just a potential source of investment capital. I think I should go, I said quietly, standing up. Yes, maybe that's best, my mother agreed quickly. Julie gets so emotional because she cares. Give it some thought, dear. This could be such a wonderful opportunity for you to finally be part of something successful. As I gathered my purse and jacket, I felt a strange calm replacing the hurt. Professional curiosity was taking over. What exactly was Doug selling? Why the high-pressure tactics for a supposedly exclusive opportunity? And why did they seem so desperate to get my money specifically? Something wasn't adding up, and if there's one thing I'm good at, it's finding the discrepancies in financial stories that don't quite make sense. The following morning, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling about Doug's investment opportunity. Years of investigating financial fraud had honed my instincts, and every alarm bell was ringing. Instead of heading straight to my office, I made a detour to the county records department. Back again, Alice? Smiled Larry, the clerk who had assisted me on numerous cases. What are we looking for today? Property records for Westlake Development Group, I replied. Specifically anything under Douglas Preston or Preston Developments. While Larry searched the database, I pulled out my phone and texted my colleague Sarah. As a fellow financial investigator with contacts at the Securities and Exchange Commission, she might have access to information I couldn't easily obtain. 2 hours later, I sat in my apartment surrounded by photocopies of public records and notes from my conversation with Sarah. The picture emerging was troubling. Doug's Westlake development existed only on paper. He had purchased the land 3 years ago but had yet to break ground. There were no building permits filed, no environmental impact studies completed, nothing to indicate actual development was imminent. More concerning were the financial records Sarah had quietly shared. Doug's company had taken in millions from investors over the past 2 years, but the money wasn't sitting in escrow for the development. Instead, it was being actively moved between various accounts and entities in a pattern typical of a Ponzi scheme, I murmured to myself, the realization settling like a stone in my stomach. The classic fraud playbook. Use new investor money to pay returns to earlier investors, creating the illusion of a successful business while actually producing nothing of value. Eventually, the scheme collapses when new investment can't keep up with promised returns to existing investors. I wanted to be wrong. I desperately hoped I was misinterpreting the evidence or missing some legitimate explanation. But 3 days of digging only confirmed my suspicions. Doug wasn't just running a questionable investment, he was orchestrating outright fraud, and my sister and parents were either complicit or victims themselves. My phone buzzed with a text from Julie. Family brunch Sunday. Doug wants to continue your conversation about Westlake. Parents already confirmed. Another ambush. But this time, I'd be prepared. Sunday arrived, and I found myself once again at Julie's mansion. The pressure tactics began almost immediately. I've brought some materials for you, Doug said, sliding a glossy folder across the table after brunch. Inside were beautiful renderings of a luxury development, professional-looking financial projections, and testimonials from early investors raving about their returns. We've already had several people interested in your spot, Julie added, but Doug insisted on holding it for you. Family first, right? My father leaned forward. Your mother and I have already seen our initial investment grow by 15% in just 6 months. It's remarkable. I nodded, flipping through the materials. And how many other investors do you have currently? Doug hesitated. About 20 serious stakeholders. All exclusive, all by personal invitation only. Including the Hendersons? I asked casually, referencing our parents' closest friends. Absolutely, my mother confirmed. Martha was just telling me how grateful they are that we brought them this opportunity. They've put in their entire retirement fund. The knot in my stomach tightened. This was worse than I thought. I just need a little more time, I said, closing the folder. It's a big decision. Time is luxury most investors don't have, Doug replied smoothly. I can only hold your spot until the end of the week. I agreed to give them my answer by Friday, and left as soon as I could politely excuse myself. On the drive home, I called Sarah. I need a favor, I said when she answered. Can you pull investor records for Preston Developments? I think my brother-in-law is running a Ponzi scheme that's about to collapse, and my parents and their friends are involved. Sarah was silent for a moment. This is personal for you. Yes, that's dangerous territory, Alice. You should recuse yourself and report it through official channels. I know, but I need to be sure before I potentially destroy my family. Can you help me? She sighed. Give me 48 hours. True to her word, Sarah delivered. What she found confirmed my worst fears and revealed something even more alarming. Not only was Doug's company financially unsound, but there were signs of imminent collapse. Large sums had recently been transferred to offshore accounts, and several longtime employees had abruptly resigned. Most devastating of all, I discovered that my parents had invested not just some, but their entire retirement savings, over $400,000, into Doug's scheme. And they had indeed brought in the Hendersons, and at least a dozen other retirees from their community, all of whom had invested substantial sums. I sat at my kitchen table that night, staring at the evidence before me. The fraud was clear. The victims were people I knew and loved, and the perpetrators included my own sister. The right course of action was obvious. Report everything to the authorities immediately. Financial fraud of this magnitude was a serious federal crime. Doug would face significant prison time. Julie, if she was knowingly involved, might too. My parents and their friends would lose most, if not all, of their investments. But could I really be the one to send my sister to prison? To destroy my parents' retirement? To be forever known in the family as the daughter who betrayed them? The alternative was equally unthinkable. Staying silent would make me complicit. More innocent people would be drawn into the scheme. The collapse would come regardless, and the damage would be even more widespread. As dawn broke, I made my decision. I would give Julie one chance to come clean, to do the right thing. Perhaps she was unaware of the true nature of Doug's business. Perhaps she could convince him to surrender before more damage was done. It was a slim hope, but I had to try. We need to talk, I said when Julie answered the door to her home the next day. Alone. She looked surprised to see me without an invitation, but stepped aside to let me in. Doug's at the office, and the kids are at school. What's so urgent? I followed her into the kitchen where she had been arranging flowers in an expensive-looking vase. The casual display of wealth turned my stomach, knowing it had been purchased with stolen money. It's about Westlake Development, I said, placing a thin folder on the kitchen island between us. And what's really happening with Doug's business. Julie's expression shifted subtly, a tightening around her eyes. What are you talking about? I've been investigating, I replied, opening the folder to reveal some of the documents I'd collected. There is no real development happening at Westlake. No permits, no construction, nothing but empty land and pretty renderings. The company is taking in investor money and using it to pay returns to earlier investors while siphoning millions into offshore accounts. I watched her closely as I spoke, looking for shock, confusion, any sign that this was news to her. Instead, I saw something that broke my heart. Recognition, followed by calculation. That's ridiculous, she said, but her denial lacked conviction. You're not a real investigator anyway. You just work for the government pushing papers. Julie, I said quietly, this is serious. It's fraud. Federal prison's serious. People are going to lose everything, including our parents. She turned away, ostensibly to adjust her flowers. You've always been jealous of what I have. This isn't about jealousy. It's about crime. Doug is stealing from people, Julie. Elderly people. People who trust him because our parents vouched for him. When she turned back, tears had formed in her eyes. For a moment, I thought I'd gotten through to her. Then she spoke. You think I don't know that? She whispered fiercely. You think I'm stupid? The admission hit me like a physical blow. You know? You've known all along? She laughed bitterly. Of course I know. I've always known. How do you think we afford all this? She gestured around her designer kitchen. Real estate development is competitive. Most new projects fail. The legitimate ones barely break even for years. So you've been helping him defraud people? Your own parents? Julie's face hardened. It wasn't supposed to be like this. In the beginning, it was just borrowing from new investors to cover delays in returns. Every business does that to some degree. But then the market turned, and some projects failed completely, and we were in too deep. Julie, people are going to lose everything. The Hendersons could lose their house. Don't you think I know that? She snapped, a tear spilling down her cheek. We're desperate, Alice. The whole thing is about to collapse. We owe millions in promised returns that we can't pay. I stared at my sister, this stranger, in expensive clothes standing in her fraudulently funded kitchen. You need to go to the authorities. Now. Turn state's evidence against Doug. It's your only chance to reduce the consequences. She wiped away her tear and straightened her shoulders. There's another way. What are you talking about? Your investment? She said, her voice taking on the same persuasive tone Doug used. Your divorce settlement. If you invest now, it could buy us time. Just a little time to fix things. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You're still trying to drag me into this? It's a sinking ship, Julie. It's family, she shot back. And if you don't help us, Mom and Dad lose everything. Every penny of their retirement. They'll have nothing, Alice. Is that what you want? What I want is for you to do the right thing before it's too late. Julie's expression turned calculating again. And if I don't? What then? You'll turn in your own sister? Destroy our family? Mom and Dad will never forgive you, you know. Never. Even if they lose everything, they'll blame you for what happens to me. She wasn't wrong. Our parents had always sided with Julie, always protected her, always made excuses for her. But this was beyond family dynamics now. This was criminal fraud affecting dozens of innocent victims. I'm giving you 48 hours, I said, gathering the documents and putting them back in my folder. Talk to Doug. Convince him to surrender. If you don't, I'll take everything I have to the FBI. Julie's face contorted with rage. You always were a self-righteous bitch. This is why no one in this family respects you. This is why Tom left you. I flinched at the mention of my ex-husband but held my ground. 48 hours, Julie. That's all the time I can give you. As I turned to leave, she called after me. If you do this, you'll have no family left. None. Is that what you want? To be completely alone? I paused at the door. I already am, I replied softly and walked out. That night, I tried calling my parents. I wanted to warn them, to prepare them for what might happen. Neither answered. When I tried again in the morning, my father picked up only to tell me that Julie had already spoken to them. She told us everything, he said, his voice cold. How you're threatening to destroy this family because you're jealous of her success. How you've always resented her. Dad, that's not. Save it, Alice. We know the truth. Doug explained the investment to us again. It's complex, but it's legitimate. Your sister would never lie to us. You're the one with the agenda here. Dad, please, just look at the evidence. We don't need to see your so-called evidence. We trust our family. If you go forward with these accusations, you are no longer our daughter. Do you understand me? The line went dead. I sat in stunned silence, my phone still pressed to my ear. They had chosen Julie's lie over even the possibility that I might be telling the truth. They hadn't even been willing to look at the evidence. With a heavy heart, I called Sarah. I tried, I told her. They won't listen. I need to make an official report. Come to my office, she replied. I'll connect you with the right people. The next 24 hours were a blur of statements, document submissions, and recorded interviews. I provided everything I had gathered, every bank statement, every property record, every suspicious transaction. The FBI agents were professional and thorough, asking detailed questions about Doug's operation and Julie's involvement. "Your sister and brother-in-law could face significant prison time," one agent told me gently. "Your parents will likely lose most of their investment. Are you prepared for that?" No, I wasn't prepared. How could anyone be prepared to send their own sister to prison? But the alternative, allowing the fraud to continue, letting more innocent people be victimized, was unthinkable. "I understand," I said. "When will you move forward?" "We'll need a few days to verify everything and secure the necessary warrants," he explained. "In the meantime, keep this confidential. Don't tip them off." I nodded, feeling numb. As I left the federal building, my phone buzzed with a text from Julie. "Final family dinner this Sunday, before Doug and I leave for a business trip abroad. Parents expecting you. Last chance to do the right thing." A chill ran through me as I read the message. They were planning to flee. The business trip abroad was an escape plan. I immediately went back inside and shared the message with the FBI agents. They exchanged concerned looks. "This accelerates our timeline," one said. "We can't risk them fleeing the jurisdiction. We'll move as quickly as possible, but it might not be before Sunday." "What should I do about the dinner invitation?" I asked. The lead agent considered for a moment. "Attend. Act normal. We may need your help keeping them in place until we can execute our warrants." I agreed, though the thought of facing my family, knowing what was coming, made me physically ill. As I drove home, another text came through, this one from my mother. "Julie says you've been making awful accusations. How could you hurt your sister like this? We raised you better." No questions about whether the accusations might be true. No benefit of the doubt. Just automatic assumption of my guilt and Julie's innocence. The pattern of my entire life, crystallized in one text message. Sunday approached with excruciating slowness. The FBI kept me updated on their progress. Warrants were being prepared, accounts were being frozen, evidence was being compiled. But they couldn't guarantee they would be ready to move before the dinner. "If they mention leaving the country, stall them however you can," the agent instructed me. "We need them to stay put until we can make arrests." By Sunday afternoon, I was a bundle of nerves. I dressed carefully in a simple blue blouse and dark pants, wanting to appear normal while ensuring I was dressed appropriately for what might follow. I slipped a small recording device into my purse, legally obtained and approved by the FBI, and headed to Julie's house for what would surely be our last family dinner for a very long time. Julie's house was unusually quiet when I arrived for dinner. No children running around, no sounds of kitchen activity, just a heavy, expectant silence. My father opened the door, his expression cold and disappointed. "Alice," he said flatly. "Come in." The dining room was formal, the table set with Julie's best china and crystal. My mother sat rigidly in her chair, not rising to greet me. Julie and Doug stood together by the sideboard, a united front. I noticed travel luggage in the hallway beyond them. "Going somewhere?" I asked, nodding toward the suitcases. "Business trip," Doug replied smoothly. "Singapore. Major investors waiting." "Convenient timing," I remarked, taking my assigned seat. Julie's eyes flashed with warning. "We've had this planned for months. Not everything is about you, Alice." The dinner proceeded with excruciating tension. My mother made stilted small talk about neighbors and church activities, carefully avoiding any mention of investments or my supposed accusations against Julie and Doug. My father hardly spoke at all, focusing intently on his food. Doug periodically checked his phone, a nervous habit I'd never noticed before. Halfway through the main course, Julie finally addressed the elephant in the room. "So, Alice, have you reconsidered your position on the investment opportunity? Doug's been holding your spot, but we need an answer tonight before we leave." "I've given it a lot of thought," I said carefully, aware of the recording device in my purse. "But I still have concerns about the legitimacy of the development." Doug's smile tightened. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating directly that I've looked into Westlake development, and the numbers don't add up. There's no actual construction happening, no permits filed, Just a lot of investor money moving through accounts and offshore transfers. My mother gasped. Alice! How dare you? My father's face darkened with anger. After everything we've done for you. After all the opportunities we've given you. What opportunities? I asked, genuinely puzzled. You've supported Julie my entire life. Paid for her wedding, helped buy this house, invested in Doug's business. What exactly have you done for me that compares? We paid for your education, my mother protested. My state university education that I supplemented with scholarships and part-time jobs, while Julie went to an Ivy League school, fully funded by you. Here we go again, Julie sneered. Poor little Alice. Always the victim. Always jealous of what I have. I'm not jealous of fraud, Julie, I replied steadily. I'm not jealous of knowing you've stolen the retirement savings of dozens of people who trusted you. Doug stood up abruptly. That's enough. I won't sit here and be accused by my own sister-in-law. You should be more worried about being accused by the FBI, I said. Which, by the way, is exactly what's happening right now. The room went deathly silent. Julie's face drained of color. What did you do? She whispered. I did what you should have done, I replied. I reported the fraud. I provided evidence. And I know about your plans to flee to Singapore tonight. Doug lunged for his phone, but I continued calmly. It's too late. Your accounts are being frozen as we speak. The FBI has been building their case for days. There's nowhere to run. My father stood up, pointing a trembling finger at me. You betrayed your own family. Your own sister! No, Dad. She betrayed you. She knew exactly what Doug was doing. She admitted it to me last week. They've stolen your entire retirement savings, and they were planning to abandon you to deal with the fallout while they escaped to Asia. That's a lie! Julie shrieked, but her eyes told a different story. Tell her, Doug! Tell her we were coming back! Doug said nothing. His attention focused on his phone, frantically tapping out messages. My mother began to sob. Julie would never. She couldn't. Ask her, I said gently. Ask her if the development is real. Ask her where your money really went. Ask her why they packed so many suitcases for a supposed business trip. Julie's composure finally cracked. You don't understand. We were going to fix it. We just needed more time, more investment, more victims, I corrected. You needed more victims to keep the scheme going a little longer. The realization began to dawn on my parents' faces. My father turned to Doug, who had abandoned all pretense of innocence and was now urgently whispering with Julie. Is it true? My father asked, his voice breaking. Is there no development? It's complicated, Doug replied, not meeting his eyes. Business is complex. There were setbacks, market factors. Stop lying, I interrupted. Just stop. It's over. Tell them the truth for once. Julie's expression shifted from panic to cold fury. Without warning, she grabbed her water glass and threw its contents directly in my face. The ice-cold water shocked me, streaming down my hair and soaking into my blouse. 10 minutes, she hissed. You have 10 minutes to get out of my house. Our parents, rather than defending me, nodded in agreement. My mother actually began to applaud, and my father joined her, a show of support for Julie even in this moment of revealed deception. I sat there, water dripping from my chin, feeling a strange sense of calm settle over me. This was who they were. This was who they had always been. No amount of evidence would change their perception of their golden child. Slowly, deliberately, I wiped my face with my napkin. I reached into my purse and pulled out the waterproof folder containing copies of all the evidence I had submitted to the FBI. Bank statements, property records, witness testimonies, everything. Well then, I said, my voice cold and controlled, you've only got 10 minutes left to pray. Julie's triumphant expression faltered. What are you talking about? The FBI will be here in 10 minutes, I explained, laying out the documents one by one. I've been cooperating with them for days. These are copies of everything I've provided. Offshore account transfers, fake investor statements, evidence of mail and wire fraud. Federal agents are on their way right now with arrest warrants for both of you. Doug grabbed Julie's arm. We need to leave. Now. It's too late, I said. Your accounts are frozen. Your passports have been flagged. There's nowhere to go. My father snatched up some of the documents, his hands shaking as he read them. His face grew ashen. These offshore transfers. These are from our account. From our retirement fund. Yes, I confirmed. And from the Hendersons, and the Blakes, and at least 15 other couples from your retirement community. All going into accounts controlled by Doug and Julie, then being siphoned offshore. My mother was staring at Julie, finally beginning to comprehend the magnitude of the betrayal. Julie, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you wouldn't do this to us. Julie's mask cracked completely. What choice did we have? The first project failed. We needed to pay back the initial investors. Then things just snowballed. We were going to pay you back, I swear. With what money? I asked. More stolen funds from new victims? That's the definition of a Ponzi scheme. We just needed time, Julie cried. If you had invested your divorce settlement like we asked, it would have bought us months to turn things around. My father slowly sank back into his chair, the documents still clutched in his trembling hands. Everything, he murmured. Everything we saved. Gone. The sound of car doors slamming outside broke the moment. Julie ran to the window and let out a strangled sob. They're here. Police cars. FBI jackets. Doug made a desperate move toward the back door, but I called after him. There are agents at every exit, Doug. It's over. The doorbell rang, followed by loud, authoritative knocking. Federal agents! We have a warrant. Julie collapsed into a chair, all pretense abandoned. Doug stood frozen, a man watching his life implode in real time. My parents huddled together, suddenly looking old and fragile. You did this, Julie spat at me. You destroyed our family. I looked at my sister, this woman I had grown up with but never truly known, and felt an unexpected wave of pity. No, Julie. You did this. You and Doug. I just refused to let you keep doing it to others. The FBI agents entered with practiced efficiency, reading rights, securing the scene. As they handcuffed Julie and Doug, my father suddenly broke down in heavy, racking sobs. I knew, he choked out, looking directly at me for the first time. Deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The returns were too good. Doug kept discouraging me from talking to a financial advisor about it, but I wanted to believe so badly. I wanted to believe Julie had found success, that we had made the right choice in supporting her all these years. His admission stunned me. After decades of unwavering support for Julie, this first acknowledgement of doubt was monumental. As the agents prepared to take Julie and Doug away, one of them approached me. Miss Wilson, we'll need you to come down to the field office tomorrow to formalize your statement. I nodded, still processing my father's words. Julie gave me one last venomous look as she was led out the door. My mother sat in shocked silence, tears streaming down her face. Left alone with my parents in the aftermath, I felt hollow. There was no satisfaction in this moment, no sense of victory or vindication. Just the heavy knowledge that our family would never be the same again. What happens now? My mother asked in a small voice. The FBI will investigate thoroughly. There will be trials. Julie and Doug will likely go to prison, I answered honestly. As for your retirement savings, some might be recoverable, if the offshore accounts can be located and frozen quickly enough, but much of it is probably gone. We have nothing left, my father whispered. I looked around at Julie's mansion, purchased with stolen money, filled with luxury items bought through fraud. You have each other, I said. And you have me, if you want me. They didn't respond, still too shocked to process everything that had happened. I gathered my things, leaving the evidence documents behind for the FBI to collect. I'll come by tomorrow, I said. We'll figure this out together. As I walked to my car, I felt like I was closing a chapter of my life. The chapter where I desperately sought approval from parents who could never give it, where I competed with a sister who never saw me as anything but a rival, where I defined myself by my family's perceptions rather than my own values. It was painful, this ending. But as I drove away from Julie's mansion for the last time, I realized it was also, in its way, a beginning. The weeks following Julie and Doug's arrests unfolded like a surreal dream. The case made headlines. prominent developer and wife charged in multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme. Reporters camped outside my apartment until I finally agreed to a brief statement, emphasizing my concern for the victims rather than my personal connection to the perpetrators. Doug, facing overwhelming evidence, quickly sought a plea deal, offering to provide information on other financial crimes in exchange for leniency. Julie maintained her innocence longer, insisting she had been unaware of the true nature of the business. But the evidence, including recorded conversations where she explicitly acknowledged the fraud, eventually forced her to accept a plea as well. My parents retreated into themselves, embarrassed and devastated. They moved out of their comfortable home into a modest apartment, their retirement dreams shattered. I visited them regularly, helping them navigate the victim restitution process and their dramatically changed financial reality. "I don't understand how we didn't see it," my mother said one afternoon as I helped her organize their new, smaller kitchen. "All the signs were there." "You saw what you wanted to see," I replied gently. "You believed in Julie because you always had. And we never believed in you the same way," my father added quietly from the doorway, "even though you were always the honest one, the responsible one." His admission hung in the air between us, decades of favoritism acknowledged in a single sentence. "It's not about me," I said, though the recognition did heal something long wounded inside me. "It's about all the people who trusted Doug and Julie with their savings." "We encouraged our friends to invest," my mother said, tears forming. "The Hendersons, the Blakes. They trusted us, and we led them straight into this nightmare." The guilt my parents carried was its own punishment, far heavier than any recrimination I could offer. Instead of dwelling on the past, I focused on helping them rebuild some semblance of security. I was leaving their apartment one evening when my father walked me to my car, something he'd never done before. "Alice," he said hesitantly, "I owe you an apology. Not just for this situation, but for a lifetime of not seeing you clearly." I leaned against my car, surprised by his words. "Dad!" "No, let me finish. Your mother and I always favored Julie. We made excuses for her, praised her for things she didn't earn, gave her advantages we never gave you. And all this time, you were the one with true integrity. The one who did the right thing, even when it cost you personally. I'm ashamed it took something this catastrophic for me to see that." Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you for saying that. We can't change the past," he continued. "But I want you to know I'm proud of you, Alice. Not despite what you did, but because of it. It took extraordinary courage." His words were the validation I had unconsciously sought my entire life. As he awkwardly embraced me, I felt something shift, a letting go of old pain, a cautious hope for a healthier relationship ahead. Meanwhile, the FBI investigation expanded beyond Doug and Julie. My recorded conversation with Julie had implicated several business associates, triggering a wider probe into real estate fraud in the region. I worked closely with Special Agent Thomas Reeves, providing additional insights based on my financial investigation background. "You should consider joining the Bureau," Thomas told me, after a particularly productive session analyzing transaction patterns. "We need people with your skills and ethical compass." Thomas was different from the other agents, thoughtful and perceptive, with a quiet integrity that resonated with me. Our professional interactions gradually evolved into coffee breaks and lunch meetings where we discussed more than just the case. 3 months after the arrests, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. Sarah appeared in my doorway, holding a thick file folder and wearing an uncharacteristic expression of discomfort. "You need to see this," she said, closing the door behind her. The folder contained financial records I hadn't seen before, transactions between Doug's company and a familiar name, Thomas Wilson, my ex-husband. "Tom invested $200,000 with Doug 6 months before our divorce," I said numbly, staring at the documentation. Sarah nodded. "I found it during a secondary review of the investor list. But that's not all." She turned to a flagged page, showing email correspondence between Tom and Julie dating back almost 2 years. Their exchanges were flirtatious at first, then explicitly romantic. In one message, Julie assured Tom that investing with Doug was guaranteed returns and that I would never need to know about us. "They were having an affair," I whispered, the pieces falling into place. "And Julie pulled him into the investment scheme." There's more, Sarah said gently. The timing of his investment aligns perfectly with when he filed for divorce. And look at this email from Julie to Doug. The message was brief but devastating. Tom's invested as agreed. Once he divorces Alice, he'll have full control of their assets and can invest the rest. Should be another 500 kelvins minimum. My hands trembled as I processed what I was reading. My sister hadn't just had an affair with my husband. She had actively orchestrated my divorce as part of their fraud scheme, targeting my marital assets. I'm so sorry, Alice, Sarah said. I debated whether to show you this, but you deserve to know the truth. I sat in stunned silence, absorbing this final betrayal. Then, surprisingly, I began to laugh, a genuine, liberating laugh that left Sarah looking concerned for my mental state. I'm okay, I assured her, wiping tears of laughter from my eyes. It's just so perfectly, completely Julie. Even in this, she had to make it about competition with me. You're taking this better than I expected, Sarah observed. I considered her words. I think I'm finally free, I realized. Free from needing Julie's approval, free from competing for my parents' attention, free from a marriage that was clearly built on lies. It's like the final piece of a puzzle I didn't know I was solving. That evening, I called Thomas Reeves and asked if he would meet me for dinner, not to discuss the case, but because I wanted his company. Over pasta at a quiet restaurant, I shared Sarah's discovery. That explains why Tom transferred his investment to a family trust right before the arrests, Thomas said. We've frozen the trust, but he's claiming he was another victim. Was he? I asked. Thomas shook his head. Not based on those emails. He knew exactly what he was getting into, both with Julie and with the investment scheme. We'll be bringing charges against him as well. I processed this information with surprising equanimity. You know what's strange? 6 months ago, this would have devastated me. Now it just feels like confirmation that I'm better off without him. Thomas reached across the table and briefly touched my hand. That's what happens when you stop defining yourself by other people's perceptions. You find your own strength. His insight struck me deeply. For so long, I had measured my worth through my family's eyes and found myself eternally wanting. But in standing up for what was right, in refusing to participate in Julie and Doug's fraud, even at great personal cost, I had finally recognized my own value. To freedom, I said, raising my glass. To integrity, Thomas countered with a warm smile. As we clinked glasses, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Possibility. Not just for justice in the case, but for a life rebuilt on my own terms, with people who valued truth and principle as much as I did. The road ahead would still be challenging. Julie and Doug's sentencing was approaching. My parents were still adjusting to their new financial reality. The victims were struggling to recover what they could of their investments. And now Tom would face his own reckoning. But for the first time, I wasn't facing these challenges from a position of emotional disadvantage. I was standing firmly in my own truth, surrounded by new allies who respected the very qualities my family had dismissed. I was, in the most meaningful sense, finally coming home to myself. 1 year later, I stood at the podium in the community center, facing a room full of attentive seniors. Financial fraud targets the elderly because scammers count on your trust, your politeness, and sometimes your loneliness, I explained. But with the right knowledge, you can protect yourself and your loved ones. This was my 4th presentation this month, part of a victim support and education initiative I had helped develop in the aftermath of Doug and Julie's fraud case. The program combined financial literacy with practical protection strategies, helping vulnerable populations recognize and avoid scams. From the back of the room, Thomas gave me an encouraging smile. After the presentation, as the seniors gathered around with questions and stories of their own, Martha Henderson pulled me aside. "You've turned something terrible into something good," she said, squeezing my hand. "Most of us recovered 60 cents on the dollar through the restitution program, which is more than we expected. But the knowledge you're sharing? That's worth more than money." Martha and her husband had lost over $300,000 to Doug's scheme, yet they had been among the first to reach out to me after the arrests, offering support rather than blame. They, along with several other victims, had formed an informal community that had become an unexpected source of strength for me, during the difficult months of trials and sentencing. "How are your parents doing?" Martha asked. "Better," I replied truthfully. "Dad's working part-time at the hardware store, which he actually enjoys. Mom's starting to socialize again. They're adjusting." My relationship with my parents had undergone a profound transformation. The collapse of Julie's carefully constructed facade had forced them to reevaluate not just their financial choices, but their entire family dynamic. There had been painful conversations, tearful acknowledgments of past favoritism, and gradual steps toward a more honest relationship. They now lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment that I had helped them find and furnish. While their retirement wasn't what they had planned, they were slowly rebuilding their lives with a new appreciation for simple security. As for Julie, she was serving a 6-year sentence at a federal correctional institution. Doug, who had provided extensive information about other financial crimes as part of his plea deal, received 8 years. Their children were living with Doug's parents, who had been uninvolved in the fraud. I visited Julie once a month, difficult encounters that oscillated between her blaming me for her situation and moments of genuine remorse. The sister I had grown up with was still present beneath the defenses, occasionally emerging in flashes of the person she might have been without the constant favoritism that had warped her sense of entitlement and ethics. "I keep thinking about how different things might have been if Mom and Dad hadn't always made excuses for me," she had said during my last visit, a rare moment of self-reflection. "If I'd had to face consequences earlier in life." Those visits were emotionally draining, but I continued them, believing that maintaining the connection was important not just for Julie, but for my own healing process. Tom had also faced justice, receiving a 3-year sentence for his role in the fraud and for attempting to conceal his gains. The discovery of his affair with Julie and their joint plotting against me had finally freed me from any lingering emotional attachment. The divorce that had once felt like a devastating failure now seemed like a fortunate escape. After the presentation, Thomas helped me gather my materials. "That was excellent," he said. "Especially the part about trusting your instincts when something seems too good to be true." "I had a good teacher in that department," I replied, thinking of my years of training as a financial investigator. We walked to his car together, our hands naturally finding each other's. What had begun as a professional relationship during the investigation had gradually evolved into something deeper. Thomas's unwavering integrity, compassion, and quiet strength had become central to my life. "Ready for dinner with your parents?" he asked as we drove away from the community center. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said with a small smile. These monthly dinners were another part of our new family dynamic, sometimes awkward, occasionally tense, but increasingly genuine. My mother was trying to connect with me in ways she never had before, while my father had become more openly affectionate and appreciative. They had welcomed Thomas warmly from the beginning, perhaps seeing in him what they had failed to value in me: honesty, principle, and a straightforward approach to life. Over pasta at their favorite local restaurant, my father raised his glass. "To Alice," he said, "not only for saving us from worse financial disaster, but for showing us what real strength looks like," my mother added. "And to Thomas, for seeing what we should have recognized all along, how special our daughter is." I felt a blush warm my cheeks as Thomas squeezed my hand under the table. "I've been thinking," my father continued, "about what you said regarding victim advocacy. The retirement community is interested in setting up regular workshops on financial safety. Would you consider leading them?" "I'd be happy to," I replied, touched by his request for my expertise, something that would have been unthinkable in our previous dynamic. As dinner continued, I observed my parents with new eyes. They were different people now, humbled by their experience, more thoughtful in their judgments, genuinely interested in my life and opinions. The family I had yearned for throughout my childhood was finally taking shape, though it had required a painful crucible to forge it. Later that night, Thomas and I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights. "Your parents have come a long way," he observed. "We all have," I replied. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed in a year." "Do you regret it? Coming forward, knowing what it would cost?" I considered his question carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that Julie and Doug made the choices they did. I regret that so many people were hurt. I paused, looking up at the stars. But I don't regret standing for the truth, even when it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Thomas nodded. That's what integrity costs sometimes. Everything. And what it gives back is worth even more, I added. Self-respect. Freedom from pretense. Relationships built on honesty, rather than manipulation. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, until Thomas shifted to face me directly. I've been thinking, he said, suddenly looking uncharacteristically nervous, about integrity and truth, and building something real. My heart quickened as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I had a whole speech planned, he admitted with a self-deprecating smile, about how your courage inspired me, how your kindness, despite everything you've been through, amazed me, how I've never met anyone with your particular combination of strength and compassion. That sounds like a pretty good speech to me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Alice, he continued, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring. I love you. I love the person you are, the principles you stand for, the way you've turned pain into purpose. Would you consider building a life with me? Tears blurred my vision as I looked at the man before me, a man who had seen me at my most vulnerable and valued me for the very qualities my family had once dismissed. Yes, I said simply. Yes. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the devastating family dinner where Julie had poured water over my head to this moment of pure joy, the path had been painful, but ultimately transforming. I had learned that sometimes the greatest act of love is standing for truth, even at tremendous personal cost. That family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by respect, honesty, and mutual support. That rebuilding after betrayal isn't just possible, but can lead to something stronger and more authentic than what existed before. Most importantly, I had discovered that in losing the approval I had desperately sought for so long, I had found something infinitely more valuable. Myself. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between loyalty and integrity? What would you have done in Alice's situation? Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most meaningful growth. If this story resonated with you, please leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience and transformation, and share with someone who might need to hear that standing for truth is worth it, even when it costs you everything. Thank you for listening. And remember, true family is built on honesty and respect, not blind loyalty to those who would harm you or others.